Remember that company Vice that people used to watch all the time? Sort of, maybe 5, 6 years ago? Well, they're not doing too well. They missed their yearly revenue goals by, I think, like $100 million. It's in this article. And then what happened was really interesting because a bunch of employees decided to unionize. I think this was like 2 years ago. And then more employees decided to unionize. And we saw layoffs. We did. Not too many. But I think it's really, look, personally, let me start by saying this. If I worked at Vice and they said we are unionizing, I'd probably quit. I would not join a union. I have been in unions before. I do not appreciate the laws and the rules around unions. Personally, collective bargaining is fantastic. And the rights and protections guaranteed to individuals to bargain as a collective, very important. But the rules and laws around unions are ridiculous. Forcing people to pay into a union that just gives, other people benefits, I don't agree with. When I worked for a union, there was, the board members were getting basically double salary by taking money from all of our paychecks, just a little bit every month. But they weren't doing anything for me, and I wasn't appreciating it. And then when I tried going to my boss and saying, hey, I'd like individual consideration for the work that I do because I do better than everyone else, they said, talk to the union because we only negotiate with them. I don't want to be forced to be attached to another group of people when that includes people who maybe don't even want to work there. So that's just my thing. Personally, I disagree with a lot of what they're doing, especially when you consider that Vice is not in a good position. They haven't hit their goals, their ratings are bad, and now the union's demanding more money. What do you think's going to happen when employees who don't produce the employees aren't producing enough money? Their revenue goal was short by $100 million, and now they ask for more money. What's a company supposed to do? Now, admittedly, there are people in this company who are very, very, very wealthy, and so they probably should be paying their employees a lot more. But I don't know if the union is the right response. I mean, look, I don't work there anymore, so it's not, the employees are going to do their thing. But let's take a look at the story and figure out what exactly happened with this union. So this is from Huffington Post. Vice unions are pissed over contract talks. 10 months after Vice TVs and video are organized, workers are increasingly frustrated with the slow pace of negotiations. Is it possibly because Vice is not doing so well? 10 months after you said that, okay. People are restless, said one current Vice employee and ready for change. On Tuesday, employees did what they could to make their displeasure known. Members of the company's various bargaining units left work and gathered on the rooftop of Vice's Brooklyn headquarters to discuss next steps. Employees also plastered posters voicing their dissatisfaction around the office. We unionized 10 months ago. Our patience has limits. We call upon Vice to sign fair union contracts, the posters read. And here you can see they got the Vice union banner, and I actually recognize a handful of these people. And they have their fists raised. I guess it's like the revolution fist. And, my response is just a face palm. There are many, many times that employees need raises. And there are many times where collective bargaining is needed to ensure that raise happens. But what people don't seem to understand is that, let's say Vice brings in $100 million. Well, then you're going to have employees going, oh my God, Vice brought in $100 million and I'm only getting paid $50,000. That's not fair. That's bullshit. And then you're like, oh, okay, hold on. Let's talk about costs. How much does it cost Vice to produce one of these episodes for TV? Well, it could be between $25,000 and $100,000. Depending on what they're doing for like HBO and they have the really good cameras and they fly to Antarctica, that's a couple $100,000. Now they're paying a couple $100,000 for one video. And they have to produce something like, I think like 24 for HBO, not to mention their daily program. Okay, so 24 times an average of $30,000. So you want to talk about them bringing on all this money, you also have to consider the writing staff, the cleaning staff, the computers, the infrastructure, the rent, the insurance. Outside of paying for flights and hotels and special trips like security for going to these countries, it's expensive, okay? It's really, really expensive. And I'm not saying that to justify Vice underpaying employees by any means. I'm just saying often people underestimate the amount of money you have to spend to make the product and just assume because they brought in this much, they should be paying more. Not only that, how much money does Vice want to keep as cash on hand to make sure they can operate the business if they face revenue shortfalls? Vice did miss their revenue target for, I believe, 2017. If that's the case, they are relying on their coffers, the money they've put aside. If the employees look at, oh, okay, we shot this documentary. It cost 50 grand. We made 100 grand. Okay, that money should be given to the employees. Like, whoa, 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 whoa. We need to put like 30 of that aside to make sure we can continue to produce content if we don't make money next time, right? A lot of people don't understand this. And then what ends up happening is Vice is not doing well and they're demanding more money. And that doesn't make sense. So let's read on. Last September, approximately 430 video content creators and post-production workers at Vice formally announced they had unionized following the lead of Vice writers who had organized 2 years before. The writers' contract negotiations in 2016 proved to be a rousing success. After 8 months, Vice management agreed to minimum annual salaries of $45,000 and across-the-board raises of 14 to 20%. Let's stop right here and talk about that salary number. What does a Vice writer do? Well, I haven't worked for the company in, I think, 4 years now. And I'll tell you what they did. They sat around Google searching things all day and then writing, and that's about it. Think about the amount of work someone has to do working as a day laborer, as somebody who's building, a carpenter or something, and how much money they're going to get. Then think about somebody earning $45,000 to sit in an air-conditioned office all day and complain about social justice on the internet. Obviously, it's not everybody. There are some legitimate news writers and there are some legitimate critics, and it's not everybody there is complaining about social justice. But let's think about the average Vice article and then realize that they're getting $45,000 per year to write a handful of these every day. Back to the story, but this time around, things have moved slower. According to Isham Christie, an organizer at the Writers Guild of America East, which is representing video content creators at Vice.com, Viceland, and the company's HBO program, we've only had a couple bargaining sessions with the company, and it's almost been a year. People are frustrated. The first bargaining session for the content creators didn't come until May 7th, according to multiple sources, and one Vice employee working on the negotiations said they were not even close to finishing the first section of bargaining. Part of the delay is tied to Vice being unable to provide an accurate employee list and other sorts of basic information in the months after union recognition. On top of that, some of the pay information was inaccurate as well. Post-production employees who are being represented separately by the Motion Picture Editors Guild started their bargaining process earlier, but have also expressed frustration with management. An email sent on June 5th by Post-Production Negotiating Committee to Vice employees that the contract talks had proceeded more slowly than it ought to. So I'm going to skip over some of their complaints. A Vice spokesperson told HuffPost that union negotiations are ongoing and the company has remained supportive of unionization throughout the process. So here's something they made. It says, "We unionized 10 months ago. Our patience has limits. We call upon Vice to sign fair union contracts. Now is the time." And you got the Vice union logo here. So let's look at exactly why Vice is probably dragging their feet. It has been a chaotic 10 months for Vice since the video and TV employees voted to unionize. Shane Smith stepped down as CEO amid fallout from articles by the Daily Beast and the New York Times depicting Vice as a company rife with sexual misconduct and top-down ethos of male entitlement. A month earlier, the Wall Street Journal reported that Vice missed its 2017 revenue goal by more than $100,000, leading critics of the company to start questioning whether it would ever live up to its one-time $5.7 billion valuation by a private equity firm. The company's joint venture with a Canadian media giant to produce a Canadian TV channel didn't work out after bleeding revenue and subscribers, according to Hollywood Reporter. And even with some recent growth, ratings for Viceland in the US have remained weak overall. Last month, the hosts of Viceland, DeSuze and Mero, announced they had decided to leave the network for Showtime. Obviously, the company was kind of in tumult, said one of its employees, but I don't think that's a reason not to come to the table with us. It's really hard to tell if it's actually malintent or just mismanagement. Vice, in my opinion, having worked there and what I don't know if this is true, has always really operated off of investment. They have made good money, and then they use that money to expand, and then investors come in, and then they expand really quick, more investors come in. They've done this, I think, like 3 or 4 times. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but I genuinely believe that Vice primarily operates off of bringing in more and more investors. And the more investors they bring in, the more the evaluation goes up. They bring in like $500 million right around the time that I left, and the New York Times asked me why I would be leaving amid them bringing in so much money, and that's not a concern to me. I'm not going to see any of that money. It's not like they're going to bring in $500 million and then be like, "Hey, Tim, here's some cash for your pocket." It's not going to happen. They're going to use that money to hire more people. They're going to use that money to buy another building. They're going to expand. But you can only expand so much if that's how you operate. Vice does make money. They do sell products, and they do really well, and they're very smart with how they do it. But as we can see here, they're not doing so well lately. And now you've got a union demanding negotiations for more money at a time when the company is not doing too well. That blows my mind. And what you need to consider is, if you're in a union, usually, and this is how it usually works, let's say you're a video producer at Vice, and you want a raise, and you are damn good, and you're the best. You're going to go to management and say, hey man, you know I'm better than everyone else, I want a raise. And they're going to say, that's great, talk to your union. We're not going to negotiate with you. And then what do? You quit. You start fielding offers from other companies, and then you quit. And you go work for someone else. Whereas if you didn't have a union, they'd be like, we recognize that you are the one busting your ass. We think you're doing a good job, and we don't want you to leave. We'll offer you a raise. So it's not definitive, but personally, I am not a union person. I am too much of a rogue. And if I worked for a company and they voted to unionize, I'd be gone. I'd ask the bosses to somehow work out something, but I would not be involved in this. Especially when you realize they're calling for fair union contracts, which typically means they want probably salary guarantees and things like that at a time when the company isn't doing well. And again, this is not to say that Vice doesn't have the money and shouldn't do it. I just think it's you look at what's going on, and the employees have no idea what's happening behind the scenes, and they're making these demands. So, you know what, man? I'm not a big fan of how unions have played out recently. I love the idea of collective bargaining, and I think sometimes we'll have to band together to fight back and to demand fair wages. But unions have crazy rules, and it gums up the works, and I think it makes it worse for people in many circumstances. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of benefits earned by people from unions historically, but I don't know if the current laws and infrastructure of how the unions work is really that beneficial. And personally, leave me out of it. I don't want to be in your collective. So anyway, that's it for today. No more videos. I've got to go do some work behind the scenes, but thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all tomorrow.